Okay, so the fourth project ahead of us, and we're still going to focus on the addEventListener function, which we know listens for specific events that we pass as the first argument, and then there is a callback function that is started every single time this event is detected. This time we could approach this topic slightly differently because there's one thing that we haven't mentioned yet. Probably there are many things that we haven't mentioned yet, but this is time to talk about a special object, special event object that is created whenever we find this event that we're listening for. So depending on the event that is specified, so for instance, if we talk about a click, we can access an information because this object has properties, many different properties like every object. And for instance, a click will have an information about what key we clicked on our keyboard. If we talk about the mouse move, like in this future project that we're going to play around with, we can access an information about the position of the cursor, where it's placed in the browser. And so this is going to be our focus for today. And before we move any further, let's have a look at the index.html file. Basically here in the body, I've set height to 200 viewport height, and I've done it for two reasons. Basically, I wanted to have more space to work with, and also because by default, if the body is empty, it's going to be set to 0, height 0, width 100%, but height is set to 0. Although you can change the background color and it's going to be visible in the entire window, the height is going to be 0, and hence I changed it to 200 viewport height, doubling its size. And what else? We have only one H1 in the body, position fixed so that it doesn't move when I scroll. It's always fixed and centered with top and left, and also to make it exactly in the center, I use transform translate. I think the easiest way to do it. Also, font size set to 40 pixels and font family Arial, so it looks nice and neat. Cool. And this is it. Only one H1 with your mouse, then changing to the positions of the cursor depending on where it is. Let's save it. I'm gonna go back to my original file and let's begin. So what we want to achieve here is that first of all, we want to add an addEventListener to the body. So we start with document and then body and then addEventListener. As the first argument, we need to be very specific about what event we want to listen for. And in this case, it's going to be a mouse, not mouse down, not mouse enter, mouse move. Great. As the second parameter, we need to pass a function. In this case, we can just pass an arrow function, although you could go traditional and use the keyword function, and it won't have, in this case, it won't be very important in this project. But I'm going with the ECMAScript 6 because it's the newest one, and I'm going to use an arrow function. So first of all, we want to check if the event is listened for, if we attached it correctly. You moved your mouse as the log message. So let's save it. And you can see that every time I'm moving my mouse, or actually I'm moving my finger on the touchpad, the event is detected, and you can see how many times. So for now, it's 650 times that I moved my mouse. Great. And so now it's this stage when we have to introduce that event object. Basically, by default, it's called an event. And so we can console log information about it. I'm going back here, and you can see that instead of the console log message, you move your mouse, I have now information about my mouse event. So let's open it. And you can see there's like loads of different things that we can access, that we can use later on, like clientX and clientY. This is going to be the thing that we're going to use in this project. We have other things like target. Target is basically where we set the event for. So basically here we've attached our function addEventListener to the body, and so that's the target. Or a type, so the type of the event is a mouse move, because there are more than one mouse event, as you can see. And so basically, this is not the end of this topic, because if we wanted to access now positions of our mouse, we could do it by like going inside the event, accessing whatever it has to be accessed. And I want to access information about the position, so this information is contained in the properties of clientX and clientY. ClientX stands for the horizontal axis, and the clientY stands for the vertical axis. And if I'm going to save it now and go back to the screen, you will see that it's now console logging the exact position of where I am in the window. If I try to go to the very, very top, because it's always the left verge and the top one of the browser that is going to be the relative to. So you can see that I cannot access quite the 0, and it's because by default margin is going to be set to 8 pixels. So I'm going to reset that and set it to 0, and let's see if it's going to work. And here now I can almost, if I try really hard, make it 0, 0. Alright, it's 1, 0. Okay, it's 0, 0. Great. So you can see that we are in the top left corner exactly. There you go. Again, still, we're not finished. So basically, you could maybe leave it like that, but the event word could get in conflict if we had it somewhere else in our program. Then what we have to do, and it's the right way to do, is to pass this function as the first parameter. Will expect the event object. So here we should pass event. And by custom, we normally say event or shorter E. But then that's the same way we have to refer it later on for in here. So it's always, well, you could use any word really. If you felt like being creative and you wanted to change it to, I don't know, cornflakes, then you could do that and it would still work. You would have to change it and adjust it everywhere. And if you do this, you can see that it still works by, we normally just leave E because it's the shortest way, or an event, and that's how you're gonna see it most often. Cool. So we're now console logging clientX and clientY, but that's not what we wanted to achieve, because we wanted those positions to be shown in our header, in our heading 1. So what we need to do, I'm going to comment this out, and we have to access h1 text content property and basically change it to, we can inject it with the string template, and that's what we're gonna do on here. And if you remember, there is this dollar and curly braces if we want to inject the name of the JS directly into a string. So that's what we're gonna do in here. So I'm gonna type it E. Actually, I'm just gonna copy paste it much faster. And then do the same thing here. Dollar curly braces and clientY. There we go. Let's see if it works. Okay, h1 is not defined. Of course, it's not defined because I didn't store it in a variable. So let's create it now. Go h1 and document query selector h1. Let's check if it works now. Let's save it. And yes, it works. So basically, we can see the positions of the cursor. If we wanted to do it slightly differently, we could still do it with the traditional way instead of using a string template, and that would be plus in the commas, in the quotation marks, comma, another plus, and clientY. There we go. Let's see if this works. It also works. So this has been just an intro to what we need to do to be able to access the properties and what is the concept of this event object. Because I'm sure you've seen that E before here, and it's like mysterious E, what does it do in here? Because nobody tells you. So basically this stands for the event, and the event can be different. But the function will always expect the event as the first parameter. Here, you could change it to a function and then remove the arrow. And it's still gonna work the same way. Sometimes I'm surprised whether it's gonna work or not, if I put something wrong. Cool. And so the next step is to play with colors. We are still in the same project. It just needs a little upgrading because we now no longer want just the positions to be changing, but we actually want the background color to be changing as well. So I have changed the height in the body tag to 100 viewport height in the index HTML, just so you're not surprised not seeing the scroll in your project. And going back here, what do you think the next step should be? What do we want to change in here is the background color. Background color of the entire window, meaning we need to access the body element. So let's type document, then body, and then we want to change the style. So we are accessing the style property, and inside that style object, we want to change the background color. And let's set it to an empty string for now. And just as a reminder, doing it this way, we are introducing an inline style, meaning the most important style in the CSS. If we go to elements and look at our body, there is no style attribute, but there will be one once we introduce the color. Let's do 222 and save it. So now after I move my mouse, the color should change and the style attribute should appear. And we have the style attribute and the background color set to RGB 34 3 times, because this is the notation for the CSS, and this is something that we're also going to use in here. So instead of a normal string, we're going to use a template string. Erase that and put RGB whatever, because we're going to replace those values in just a second. So instead of the values here, I want to use those values from here. So I'm injecting them in here, and instead of second value, I'm going to take the position of clientY, and the third one, I'm going to put a random number of 100. And let's see how this is responding. So now we can see a mini success because the background color is changing with our mouse move. But as you can see, this is not quite perfect because in RGB, the maximum number representing the color is 255. So the range is between 0 and 255, whereas the position, and you can see that the window is pretty small. So if we spread it to the entire screen, it would be much bigger and those numbers would be much higher. So we will play with it slightly. So this, let's divide by 3. This, let's divide by 2. And instead of 100, we will do something else. I'm gonna do clientX divided by clientY. And let's do times 20. Okay, let's save it. Let's see, the numbers same, and in RGB we're going much lower. Cool, so we're not reaching this limit of 255, so it is slightly better. Still not the ideal, not the most optimal solution, but for now I'm pretty content with this. Let's just show you the alternative to using a template string, which is a little painful to do, but let's do it anyway. So I'm gonna comment this out, create another background color, and now we want to work with the normal string. Let's place RGB so that we can again be basing on something. And this is our starting point. So here now, everything that is a character, we need to wrap in quotation marks. And then instead of because we no longer have that backticks and a template string, so we cannot inject our values directly, we need to use a plus operator. Here, again, plus operator, in quotation marks, any character, so a comma, another plus in here, another quotation marks, which will be wrapping a comma, plus, quotation mark, closing the parentheses, and why is this wrong? Expected for RGB, this is wrapped, this is wrapped, this is wrapped. Oh, I'm missing another plus operator. So now it's okay. And instead of the 32 value, I want to place the same value as I had before. So I'm gonna copy paste the same thing that we had before. And the same from here, instead of the last value. And let's see if this works. So this works. It works. It's doing the same thing as before, but as you can see, this requires a lot of quotation marks, a lot of plus operator, and it's like this concatenation thing is a lot of headache compared to a simple template string that you just like typing as you go, and using the dollar and curly braces to directly inject the values. So this is us upgrading our project. The background color is changing. And let's see what I've prepared for you in the next material. This is the time for your task. I think this one is quite pleasing. We are going to work with colors. It's not a very mathematical one, but it still engages your brain because there will be lots of conditions they will have to face. And well, basically, we need to generate a different color for different numbers. So depending on what numbers we receive, this is a client X and client Y. So the position of the mouse or wherever we're going to click, the click is listening, or the event listener is listening for that click. And depending on where we were at this point, we are going to receive different location, and depending on whether the number is odd or even, or both odd or both even, just one odd and one even, we're going to produce a different color. We're listening on the body element here. So the only thing I've changed in the index.html is that I set the margin for body and the height for the body to 0 and 100 viewport height, so that it's going to cover the entire web page, so the entire window here. And just bear in mind that we are listening on the body element, not on the window object, which for this project is going to be pretty much the same, but we need to practice different things each time. And well, we have those set of conditions here in our main.js file. Nothing but the set of conditions, so some commentaries. So if the value for X and the value for Y is an even number, then change the background color to red. If the value for X and Y is an odd number, then change it to blue. And if only one number is an odd number and the other one is an even number, then make it green. So I'm thinking this is quite possible to accomplish. You just need to get involved with those conditions and remember to set up a click as the first thing. Second thing, to make sure that you get inside that style object and into the background property and set it to a specific color depending on those conditions. And try to optimize your codes to make it as transparent as possible. And if you stop somewhere halfway through and you feel like you can't do it and you feel like 5 minutes have passed and you're still in the same place, then don't worry, skip it and let's go to the next video where we are going to do it together. We're just at the beginning of this way of becoming a developer, and so don't be too harsh on yourself. Practice makes masters. So good luck. I hope you still like me, at least just a little bit. And regardless of whether you managed to do it or you didn't, I think you should do it with me, because I'm going to introduce a new concept. And I'd be really super surprised if you manage to get there on your own because we still didn't cover the topic of a function inside the function. And I think this is a good place to start, kind of like isolating chunks of code responsible for a separate task. But let's get started and you'll see along the way what I mean. So the first thing we need to make sure that we are listening for a click event on the body element. So let's do a document body addEventListener. As the first parameter, we are passing a click because we are listening for a click. And the second parameter is a function. I'm going to use an anonymous function. There we go. And we know that for this project, we need values for X and Y. So I'm going to pass an E for the event object. And here I'm going to console log those values, E client X and E client Y, to make sure that everything has been attached properly and we are listening for that click event. Code 93 and 133, 11, 12. Cool. Everything works fine. And the second thing is that we need to make sure that we are able to change the color of the background. So we are going to do again document body, get inside the style element, and here we want to work on the background color property. For now, I'm just going to do hard-coded red. And when I click on the body element, we have red color. But if there's one thing we've learned so far, is that if there is an element on the web page that we want to be able to modify dynamically throughout the process of like working on the application, is that we need to store it in a variable. So I'm going to create a color variable and I'm going to assign the value of the color variable to our background color. Here I'm going to declare color, and here is the surprising part, the new part. So instead of creating, because color is going to be determined by a set of conditions, deciding what to do if we receive an odd number, an even number, or both even numbers, etc. as in the scenarios. And instead of placing the entire body of those if statements here, we are going to use a getColor function. I'm placing the parentheses here straight away, which means that on every click, this getColor function is going to be called, executed, is going to return a value of color, and this color is going to be stored here in this variable. And here, setting the color for the background color of the body. Whenever you return a value by a function, this returned value is the value of whatever is on the left-hand side. So we've got an assignment operator, and if there is something returned from a function, this returned value is the value for that variable. Cool. So what's left for us is to create our getColor function. I'm going to do a function expression, getColor, use an arrow function, and as we said, to determine what color is to be produced, we need to know the values for X and Y. And to access those values, we need to expect a parameter. So I'm going to do an event here. And this is the parameter. So this is us saying to the function, hey, I'm going to be like passing a value here, which you can name anything you want. But in here, we want to pass an actual argument, meaning the actual value. So we are going to use the E from event, and this way we are having an access to everything that the event object has inside. Also the clientX and clientY, which we need for this project. Cool. So now, last thing to do is to cover those possible scenarios. The first scenario is if the value for both X and Y is an even number. So I'm going to do an if statement, and here we need to determine whether the X is an even number. How do we do it? If you paid attention to our theory class, there is a thing called modular. And if I do event client X, I will have here the value of our X and modular 2. So, modular 2, meaning that any number divided by 2, if it's gonna give us 0, so there is no remainder, that would mean that the X is an actual even number. So every time we have an even number under X, this condition is going to be met, and the function will go on, or the interpreter will go on to read the next part. And in the next part, we are going to check whether the client Y is an even number. Here we need to swap for Y, and here we have that. If X is an even number, then check if the Y is an even number, and if they are both even numbers, then we need to produce red. We need to use a keyword return, because if we don't return anything, the function is still going to be executed, but we need this returned value to be placed here so that we have actual color under the color variable. Return red. If the conditions are true and there is a return word, the function stops right there. It doesn't read what are the further conditions, it just stops right there. So we have the first option covered. If both numbers are even, then we have to create number red. In case the X is an even number, but client Y is not an even number, then it would go to an else statement, and that would mean that one number is even and the other one is an odd number, and we want to, in this case, we want to return green. Cool. Let's save it and let's check if this will actually produce the result that we want. The first number is an even number, so this expression has been set to true, and it went on to read the second expression. Y didn't evaluate to true because this is not an even number, so it went on to read what's in the else statement, and it returned green. Green then has been produced by the get color here and substituted by under the color here, and hence the background color turned green. Cool. And now we have to cover also other conditions, but let's check, maybe we can get red as well. Right, on the first attempt, and the first number X is an even number, so it went on to check the second condition, and client Y is also an even number, so it returned red and it stopped reading the code. Okay, and another thing we're going to check, because if this event client X is not an even number, the entire thing is not going to be entered. So we will never be able to check whether the y is odd or even number, because as soon as the first condition is false, the entire statement is just skipped altogether. So now we need to check again if the clientY is an odd or even number. Cool. If it is even, we will know for sure that the y was not, because if it has been skipped, x is an odd number. So it's been skipped altogether. It went on to read if the y is an even number, and we know that one number will be odd and y would be an even number, meaning that we covered again this scenario here. The third one is an odd, one is a an even number, and we have to return green. So we're almost finished, because we've covered many situations here, many possible situations, but we still need to know if this has been skipped, and we know that the x is an odd number in this situation, then if even clientY has been also skipped and didn't return green, we know that both x and y are odd numbers, and this would cover our scenario number 2, which is both numbers being odd numbers, and we need to return blue. So we place here an else statement, and we say return blue. So I'm kind of thinking that everyone has to analyze the code on their own, unless this was the exact same idea that you had. So in this case, you don't have to analyze it because you thought the same thing as me. But for anyone else, you just need to go on and think if all the situations have been covered. But I am pretty sure that they have. So let's check 59. The first one was an odd number, and the second one was a even number, and it produced green. So which scenario has been covered from here? From what if statement has been entered and what has been returned? If the first one was an odd number, x has been an odd number. So it went on, it checked if x was an even number. No, it wasn't, so it skipped it all together and entered the second if statement, checking if the y was an even number. Y is an even number, so it returned green and it stopped reading the code. It didn't go any further. 120 and 105. This is also green, but the first x is an even number. So the first if statement here checked if the x was an even number. It was. So it went on to check the second condition, and because y was not an even number, it evaluated to false, and it went to the else here and returned green. You can see it's different green. This is from this condition and the previous one from here. Oh, great, blue. The first one is an odd number, so we know that the first one was skipped altogether. It went on to check if the y was an even number, and it wasn't, so it went to this else statement and it returned blue. Cool. So if you want, go on and analyze it. If you don't feel like it, then, well, I think you should. Cool. Thanks.